what has happened for Podfest with all the odds stacked against us. This little group that started with 13 people at a meetup has grown into the thousands globally.
You are listening to Amplify Your Success Podcast, episode 273. And today we're going to get a peek behind the curtains with one of the leaders in the podcasting movement on how starting ugly and community has created massive growth. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success Podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and business leaders. It is your host, authority amplifier for your brand, Melanie Benson. And today I'm talking with a friend of mine who I'm so excited. We have Krimitsos joining us today. And I've taken him on a journey he doesn't often go on a podcast interview, even though he's done thousands. So you're definitely going to want to tune in to hear how his principles of starting ugly and community helped him source every level of growth. It's a fascinating conversation. And I'm super excited. I'm going to be part of the live Podfest in May, and I've been speaking at each of the Podfests. So if you're listening to this down the road, if you're joining us for Podfest, listen in for a special code to save on your Podfest tickets this year. Now, this whole conversation to me is a major catalyst for my 7-step plan that you've been hearing me talk about. Speaking, having live events, these are all powerful ways to move people into action, to want to be a part of what it is you teach and what it is you're about. Community is such an extraordinary way to activate desire in your community for what you offer. If you don't yet have my 7-step plan, I highly recommend you download it before you listen to today's episode. Head over to amplifywithmelanie.com. What you will get is my exact framework for turning speaking opportunities, podcasts, virtual stages into your number one lead source. I call it 7 steps to get booked on hot stages, to get ideal clients coming to you through leads, and transform them into 5-figure deals. This is a very powerful framework, and it's worked for me very well for the last 21 years. So I would love to share it with you. It's free right now at amplifywithmelanie.com. Now, let's get into today's episode. Well, I am so excited to talk to my friend Krimitsos today. He and I have been bouncing around his Podfest world for a while. I've been dying to have him come on the podcast. This is also going to be a little behind the scenes video that we'll be sharing on YouTube and Facebook. And we're talking about how to build a massive network of people that support your dreams. Now, let me give Chris his official intro. Krimitsos holds the Guinness World Records title for the largest attendance for a virtual podcasting conference in 1 week, and is a leading expert on podcasting and on-demand audio. His international conference, Podfest, is the longest running continuous in-person podcasting event in the world and attracts thousands of attendees from over 50 countries every year. With 2 decades and over 2,000 live events under his belt, Chris has worked with the world's most influential voices in marketing, audio, and technology. Those experiences inspired his best-selling book, Start Ugly, which has quickly become the go-to guide for entrepreneurs and influencers who are beginning their creative journey. Now, he's not just an educator. Chris has a penchant for being an on-demand innovator, as seen in Chris's own kid-friendly podcasting network, having garnered over 1 million podcast downloads. And as a podcast consultant and coach, he's also helped all kinds of ventures, including the Women's Meditation Network, to grow to millions of monthly downloads. So Chris, I would have to say you definitely qualify as an authority in the podcasting world. So I'm so glad you're here today. Thank you.
Melanie, thank you for having me.
And I have to say, I love so many things about who you are and what you do in the world. And I feel like one of the things I want to start with is I just want to get a little bit of your backstory. I know you could probably do a whole episode just on your backstory, but maybe we can hit a little bit of the high notes on what was the catalyst for getting into the podcasting event space? Because it's not just podcasting, but you're in the podcasting event space, which I think is a really unique part of the niche.
Well, the backdrop, and this will tie into everything I'm doing today. As a little child, I used to watch TV, and this was when we only had like 13 main channels, and cable was fairly new. But I remember yelling at the TV saying they're programming it all wrong. So like I knew, I don't know why I would do this, but I'd be like, this should go here and this episode should go to after this episode. So that's just something I would do as a kid. And I'm like, I wish that I could program this because I could do such a better job. Fast forward to I was doing 2 live TV shows in Tampa Bay, Florida. I'd moved here from New York, and those TV shows were really well received. One was called Millionaire Mindset, which is a business show. The other one was called The Bleep and Truth, and it was a political debate show. Actually, it would probably be really big right now, but it was cutting edge at the time. We had a polar opposites debate, and due to like the nature of TV, I got into it with the station management, and I was no longer on the station anymore because you have to sometimes bend your values based on what the management wants, and I wasn't willing to do that. So I then found myself creating. I had this show called Millionaire Mindset. The political debate show, I enjoyed watching 2 viewpoints, but to be honest with you, I'd go home with migraines, and it just wasn't like I didn't want to live that way. I don't know if that makes sense. So even though I was good at it, programming wise, it wasn't what my soul wanted. And the Millionaire Mindset, I enjoyed talking about business and helping people. So I think the helping part was really good, and I understood business. So it was a niche I could play in. And I created a community group known as the Tampa Bay Business Owners. And we would provide, that became, you might call it an event, but it was a community. And the way we would satisfy the community is through events. So we would do 150 to 200 events a year. And every month we'd have the main event where I would interview a CEO in front of a live studio audience. I say studio audience, basically live audience in front at a business club, right?
Right.
And I enjoyed that. And then one of those meetings, we had a gentleman talk about podcasting, and here I am. I had my TV roots. I know all about media because I had done a lot of production, and I was like, this podcasting is so interesting that it's lagging behind video, because at the time, this was in 2013, YouTube was very well established. For those that forget, when YouTube first came out in February 14th of 2005, there was 10 other video aggregators like YouTube out there. They all went out of business shortly thereafter. Only Vimeo survived. So I'm very familiar with the landscape of how all this evolved from when we had a few channels to cable to the online medium and all this. So when I saw podcasting, I said, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to help a lot of people get their voices out there. There's not enough content creators. And I want to start a show. At the time, I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. My wife beat me to it. She wanted to do one specifically for female CEOs because she said, hey, we need more voices out there of female CEOs. I remember we had our first podcasting fight over who was going to start a show. She won. Not because, by the way, not because like she won because she had a better topic. She had what she wanted. And this is a good entrepreneurial lesson. I knew at the time, if I wasn't clear on what I wanted, and my wife was, why don't I gain the psychic benefits of her launching it and me being her marketing manager? So then we teamed up. I said, I'll market it, you launch it. And that's how these events evolve very organically, because I saw my wife pulling all-nighters at the time. The technology, and this is very hard to believe, but like USB mics hadn't been invented yet. A lot of these unique things that we know of now, as a matter of fact, weren't around yet. So I said, why don't I do a meetup to help people? And then from that meetup, we said, why don't we create a yearly conference to help other people? So I would say, if you were to say, how did this all happen? It was accidental, but it was also me trying to solve a need, trying to help a community that needed support. And that's kind of how Podfest grew out of those seeds.
As you're talking, I can hear how your business superpower played a role in influencing the path you took. It's like there's a big thing that you value, there's a big thing that you serve the market with, and those things started to come together and then brought you into Podfest and the event world, which makes perfect sense. And I don't know if you know this, Chris, but I was actually on your wife's first podcast many years ago. I didn't
I
even
didn't know that.
I didn't connect the two of you till much later when I ran into Katie at another event. And she goes, yeah, you remember you came up? I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even put two and two
That's so
together.
cool.
So yeah, I actually still have the episode somewhere. Anyway, love how the worlds start to collide again. So our theme for today's call, because we could talk about so many different things, but really deep diving into this idea of a network, because and I like that you call it community, because I think the way the world is going, the power of our community, the power of our network, if you will, is going to play a very big part in, I think, how like the momentum that someone can ride towards their goals. Why is having a network such a key component of what you're creating and accomplishing?
This is something I've noticed recently. Maybe it's happened over the last 10 years. People have become siloed a lot.
Mhm.
And maybe a podcast is their only human connection outside of their work. I know, like, because of COVID, people become siloed. But before that, people were becoming siloed a lot in general, just the way technology is forming. So now we have, with COVID, it accelerated people working from home, so friendships are not as current. Probably people aren't seeing each other as much. So there's a deeper need to have human connectivity. And I have found that if you could create really great relationships and have depth with those relationships, it just makes your life a lot easier. So I happen to be also a super connector. So a lot of people say, hey, who do you know here? Or do you know anyone that could help me? Or weird things like I had a friend the other day. He's a trapper. He goes in to get like the squirrels out of the attic, and then he releases them out there. He's retiring, and he goes, and I don't know why he asked me. He goes, I need someone to take over my business. Can you find me someone? And I said, that's not something I do. He goes, I know you'll do it. Like that, and he hangs up the phone. So I found that funny. And then in my head, I go, you know what? Let me just think about it. And as I thought about it, I know the exact person, not to take over his business, but that does work release programs and manufacturing and like people that are in the trades. And this is something that would be a great opportunity for someone to take over a business to make six figures, 2 years of training, and then they have their own business. So I called that person up and he said, oh yeah, this would be great. Get me a write up and I'll post it all everywhere I go. So that's because I have a deep network. I helped this young man when he was working in the manufacturing trades, because I just enjoy it. But now here I am, I could connect that. And if I ever need something, he could help me. So I think it's very important to, I look at life very, I don't want to say uniquely, because there's people that look at it this way. I look at it like we're all on this journey. We don't know how long our time is in this physical form, right? This organic form. So I would like to make deep relationships with the people around me so I could have really great, meaningful experiences with them. And sometimes some aren't really comfortable, but they're still experiences nonetheless. And I look at that as that's the journey. So I'd rather enjoy that rather than some endpoint. So what has happened for Podfest, with all the odds stacked against us, this little group that started with 13 people at a meetup has grown into the thousands globally, because we just did what was the next logical step for the community, and
Mm.
it's grown on its own, and it's been amazing to watch. But we've listened and we've paid attention to the needs of that community. So many people mistake that, oh, if Chris just puts something up, people show up. That's not true. Um, I listen to what the community needs, and then I formulate it. How can we get the best players or the best programming, or who do we ask to bring that out in the community? And then it creates value, and then that snowballs on itself.
Yeah, I've watched you do that. It's actually kind of magical to see that. Um, it's almost like you have this eighth sense, if you will. It's not really a sixth sense or seventh sense. It's actually an eighth sense where you can hear what's emerging and tap into that. And I guess this would probably be along the same lines. I think that when you have a community There are two ways people harness the power of community. And one is more passive, where you kind of train that community and cultivate a relationship where it's more passive and they kind of respond to things when they want to. You've done something very different with your community. And I'm very curious if it was intentional or if you just kind of noticed later what happened, but you actually inspire people to be movement leaders with you. Like, you inspire members of your community to step up and make things happen as part of the Podfest community. So is it intentional? Is it something that you just kind of noticed was happening and are writing it? What do you think is the distinction for you there?
So we've had three levels of pivots or growth within Podfest. So the first pivot was just getting people together, and it's an event that people actually show up to, right? So that was like
Yeah.
normal stage. You go from 100 to 200 people. And then we moved it to Orlando. And that's when we had just under 400 people. And I remember the feedback forms were, Chris needs to get help. Chris shouldn't be running around. And like, people actually put this in the feedback forms.
Yeah.
And I remember the lactic acid in my legs. I couldn't walk the last day of the live show. I was limping. Because if anyone's ever done a live show, it's nerve wracking, especially like, so what I intentionally said was like, okay, I physically can't do any more than one person can, like, I've hit that capacity. So then we had to intentionally create, how do we give the ownership to the community, and how do we then allow the community to build itself, but create boundaries and guidelines to allow for that growth to be with the same intention that the original vision was. So since then, we've done that. And then you saw this last pivot point, which was during COVID, we had to go virtual. So now we went global. Like, we were always global, but you'd have to come to Orlando to come see us. Virtually, we went global. So now it's like, how do we inspire people in different countries with different languages? And how do we, and that's when we really fully adopted the Tony Hsieh model, how he built Zappos, allowing literally leaders to take over sections. And what that allows for is two things. It allows for really amazing things to happen. And at times it allows for some crappy things to happen. You have to be okay with the crappy thing being, it's just a lesson learned. Okay, that's probably someone we're not going to trust next time with that kind of thing, but maybe they could help in some other way. But you have to be okay with it, because it's part of the experimenting. Now, you know this, and I know this. The majority of it is amazing, but I'm watching the back end, so I see everything.
Yeah.
So, but that's now that has allowed us to grow to where we literally are seen as a global brand, and we're helping people all over the world. And I'm really proud of that. And it's pretty amazing, because if you ask me, like, did you ever think, yeah, maybe I dreamed of, like, oh my God, but not the way it happened. It didn't, my vision was not how it happened, which I think is even pretty cool how it happened on its own, virtually.
Yeah, I think what happened virtually was extraordinary. And I was like imagining, as you were just talking, you wrote the book Start Ugly. I almost imagine there's probably a part 2 in you somewhere of Grow Ugly. And it's like, there's so many people that hold on to this perfectionism and it chokes their growth. And what would happen if we let some things not be perfect in order to scale the reach of our mission and the work that we do in the world? So anyway, just was thinking like there's a business lesson in there.
And Melanie, the book helps because of two things. If I have a new team member that joins me, I have them read the book so they buy into the philosophy. So in the past, I had trouble having a team buying into the philosophy of Start Ugly, and most people do. What you realize is, as you grow your team or your company or whoever you're working with, if they don't buy into it, it doesn't work.
That's
So
true.
I had to have them buy into the fact that, hey, registration in this way might be a mess, but we'll fix it in real time. Or we're going to try this. And they're like, how does it work? And I would have to openly say, I don't know. We're going to figure it out together. So if they weren't bought in, luckily the book really helped me, because it's a 30-minute read. You could explain the concept. And then once everybody buys in, you could really set growth at much higher rates. So it's been a blessing, not just for like me writing a book, but it's been a blessing because my team reads it and they buy into the concept.
Yeah. We got to have values that everybody's willing to be in together. Let's talk about this brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I don't know if it was a vision or a marketing strategy or just something cool to do. I don't know where it fit in for you. I know we'll unpack that, but you got everybody totally enraptured by going for a Guinness World Record during your online Podfest. How did that play out? Like, what was the catalyst for that? And how did you see that activate your community in a positive way?
So after Podfest, so we had an actual live in-person event, 2020, the last one of the year, the only one in the podcasting space, and in person. And then we did a test a month later. I watched Tiger King right after that because everything shut down. Let my hair grow. I mean, we all have stories, but you could see it in the pictures. And then I remember saying, "Let me do a quick tester virtual event." And it's weird because once we had a really amazing in-person event. So doing a virtual event wasn't as inspiring, even though you had to do it. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like a mental block. So I
Mhm.
did a 1-day test where all the videos were pre-recorded, but they launched on a Saturday. I didn't know what I was doing. I had a friend help me. And we had like 1,000 people show up. And this was I think we sent out an email on a Wednesday and the darn thing launched on Saturday. So I was like, that's really strong. So I was lamenting to a friend of mine what I should do. And he's like, you should really create something big in August. And at the time, I know it's going to sound funny. We're like, well, maybe this COVID thing will be over by August, maybe people go back in September. We didn't know yet, so I was like, so I'm thinking as a promoter timing, like if I do it, and then will we get an audience, all this stuff. Yeah. So whatever. So I put on the back burner and I was watching Sing. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Sing with my daughter, and Mr. Moon is a promoter and he has like a place. It looks like San Francisco, the city with a theater, and his theater explodes because he put all these fish tanks in there and it's in ruins. And I started crying. My daughter couldn't see it, she was in front of me, but I started tearing up because I was thinking about all the promoters like myself. I was lucky, but all my friends had lost everything. And then what happened was Mina, who's this elephant that has the most brilliant voice, she sang the song Hallelujah in this bombed out shell of a theater, and he's inspired to try again. And it wasn't the same theater it was before, but he rebuilt it in a new vision, and the whole community showed up out of nowhere in the rubble, sat down, and the show was epic. So my friend Gabe at the time says, why don't you call the Guinness World Record, see if they certify it? I said, just like most normal people would say, oh, that's crazy. He goes, well, you always tell people think big, why don't you think big? And I said, oh, that's good point. So I call him up and they go, actually, as a matter of fact, we would be interested in certifying this record. We need to talk to our adjudicators, but you'd have to hit 5,000 people. At the time, I thought it was pretty doable. It was extremely hard to get 5,000 people because you realize, like, yeah, everybody's home, but now you got to get five. There's a lot of events going on.
Mhm.
Luckily, we beat it by 3. We had 5,003. But what happened was magical. We crowdfunded it to our community first. So before I could lay out the money, because it was going to be costly, I um, I asked my community to support it. Within 45 minutes, we had reached 100% of our crowdfunding goal on that call, telling them what I wanted to do. And like you said, that momentum kept building, and I think it hit 400% a goal. That gave us 50% of the money we needed to launch the darn thing. And then the rest came through sponsors because they saw the community supported it. And the tickets were free. We had some like upgrades, but for most part, 90%, 95% of the tickets were freemium. And we had over 5,000 people show up. And we did some really cool things, Melanie, that we didn't know we could
Mhm.
do. So because
Yeah.
we didn't listen to the other live streaming experts, we did like usually you're supposed to break each breakout separately. Instead, we put it all on the same Zoom and we made them like big squares. So if you click on the squares, it would add like all 4 or 5 of those sessions. So what would happen is someone would get in the room and not leave because they're like, oh, there's another good thing up. I'm going to just stay here. So I remember the app company said to us, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? They go, your people have collectively consumed, it was like 29, it was like in the millions of minutes. And I go, I don't know, but we're laying it out this way. And we notice that people, once they get in, if the speakers are good, they just keep staying in. And, we're having a good time. They're having a good time. So no one stops and then they come back. So now everybody wants to be part of it. So with the community in mind, we did some testing that actually worked really well.
Yeah, it was brilliant to watch. I was honored to be one of the speakers in that event. I've spoken at a couple of your events, and I'll be at the next Podfest in May here, and I'm excited about that because what I notice happens is there is a integration of creativity and like not letting the industry norms dictate the experience that you're willing to create for people. And what happens, in my opinion, as both a consumer and a speaker, is there's something that emerges that is very compelling, and like it's like this contagious energy that everybody wants to be a part of. Because what would happen for me, because you probably don't know this, is people are like, are you speaking at Podfest? Are you going to Podfest? You got to be there. And I'm like, well, what is Podfest? What am I supposed to know here? And that is how you create a movement that is magnetic and like creates this energy. It's like everybody's got to be there. So you're doing a great job of keeping people like in a new experience that makes people like, well, what are they going to do this time?
You know what's interesting, Melanie? There's a lot of I'm not a social media like star. There's nothing in my
Hmm.
socials that you're like, ah, this guy doesn't pop out. And then a lot of people have asked me, how the heck have you been successful? And it goes back to this conversation. I'm focused on the value that I'm bringing to the community. So when you feel the love, you tell someone else, hey, you should really be there. This is really good. Like, this is not like the other, things. If you really want to make some connections. And I've seen some really big name speakers that we know that are real big celebrities do events, and they're like, we're going to blow everybody out of the water. And what people don't realize, that's all ego
Yep.
of, I want to be the best. I'm going to be whatever. And they've never like sat there to ask, like, what does the audience really need? I remember a friend of mine bought a ticket, a couple people, to this event up in New York City, and it was like $5,000, $6,000. And I said, what did you learn from the panels? They go, they were just saying the podcast is the next thing. I go, in my world, for who I serve, that's like, duh, like, the podcasters now need to know, what are these Web3 things? How do we use them for our own, tools? What does that mean? What are NFTs? What are, how do I monetize? How do I get my Patreon going? How do I fire up all these different things? So I'm really focused in on what are the topics that this audience needs that no one else is fulfilling, so they could get what they need. But then, as you know, the more important question is, who do I connect Melanie to when she shows up, or who she should meet, so she could create her own peer-to-peer level connections to
Yep.
grow what she's doing. And that happens a lot in our ecosystem, and that's all intentional. It wasn't like accidental. And I think that's the value that keeps people coming back.
Yeah, and I'll add one more piece that I personally experienced, and that is the buzz about the Podfest community is generosity. So we have a common friend, Allison Melody, who she's like, every time Podfest comes up, she's like, oh my God, you got to be there. It is like, the community is so generous. So I'm in the community. I've been a speaker. I'm a participant in the Facebook group. And what I notice is how generous the spirit is of everybody who, they're not just there just to be seen and to get business. They're there to cultivate relationships and give. And I think that's a magical quality. I know I've used that word a lot today, but I do think it's a very under tapped energy in community overall these days. So well done on being the leader that inspired generosity in your community.
Can I share you a story about that
I
I
would love
haven't
to hear that.
shared
Yeah.
in years? So my last name is Greek, and my grandparents and my parents are from Greece. So I would visit every 2, 3 years over in Greece. And I remember, I think it was like 13. I would stay at my grandfather's house, and just like homes in like Mexico or Europe, they have like a cement wall gate that you enter, and then you have the house, right? And when I would stay at my grandfather's house, when I'd walk down the steps, his bathroom was downstairs. The old timers were at the cafenio, the cafe right outside, and they could see you like in your boxers going down to the steps. And it'd be like 5 in the morning. They were already up. They would wish me good morning. And there were all these characters, like it looked like a Simpsons cartoon. You couldn't make it up. All these characters with their worry beads and their coffee, 5 in the morning. And you're just trying to go to the bathroom and then go back up and get some rest. So I remember 3 years later, and what the one guy that would hold court, his nickname, don't ask me why, was Taco. So Taco had a huge mustache. He was like 6'2", like looked like a cowboy out in this little Greek village. And I remember 3 years later, I went back and I was going to the bathroom, and there was no one out there. It was like 1 or 2 people. And I went to my uncle. I go, what happened to all the guys? And he goes, well, Taco passed away. And I said to him, why would that have any bearings on everybody hanging out? He goes, well, we all grew up as kids and we all used to fight. And Taco was the one that would put us all together and tell us to shut up and have fun. And he goes, now that he's gone, we're all fighting again. And he goes, and then I remember another day there was like in Europe, in Greece, like especially name day of a saint is a big deal. That's like a almost like a birthday celebration if you're named after, any saint. And there was a big Elias is a big celebration in our town. And I remember it wasn't that big that year. And I said to my uncle, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, you see, Taco is the one that will go up to everybody's house and say, 'Hey, we got to give." You're going to give some oranges, you're going to give some olives, you're going to give, everybody would give because of Taco. He would go collect from all of us, and then we'd all show up and we'd have a big party. And he goes, now that he's not here, no one shows up for the thing. So in a really weird thing, as a young person, I realized the impact one life could have on an entire village, because these people literally were born in the same village together and lived in that ecosystem for that generation. And you realize, like, we all have different impacts in this world. And I just thought that was so cool that this one guy could bring everybody together, play nice, tell them to shut up and stop squabbling for a little bit. And then when he was gone, you could actually see the impact of one life. Since then, I'm proud to report that the shopkeeper, Andoni is his name, his daughter Kula has taken up 10 or 15 years later, she's taken up the mantle of organizing the village, and she takes them on trips to all over Europe. They do yearly trips. They all contribute. So it's pretty cool to see that energy back. But it took about a decade for it to be replaced.
Oh, I love that. So, am I interpreting in that story that you are Taco?
I hope to be the person that can at least bring people together to come hang out with one another
Yeah.
and forget about all the other stuff that distracts us and have a good time. Yeah. So I would say I it impressed me so much that maybe inadvertently I've adapted a lot of things like that, and I love helping people. And people ask me for all kinds of stuff. For the most part, I'll give them the shirt off my back. So that's
That's a
that's part
great
of.
story.
Yeah, because when Taco's life was done, I saw the impact, and he obviously knew
Mhm.
I'm sure he knew. He might not have known how impactful he was, because most people, they just do what they do, but you could see the impact that one man had. And in this village, you have to realize, in these little villages in the countryside, money doesn't mean anything. The economy is like, one guy's making their own feta cheese, the other one's literally, it's all agricultural.
Yep.
Someone's got a mule, like that's like wealth. And you could see one guy created the wealth of the entire village by bringing them all together throughout the year. And then it was also interesting to see 60-year-old men still fighting like little children. And I think early on I realized, like, we're all just grown up babies, not realizing it, dealing with our own issues. Because
Yeah.
he would tell them to, because you had, there was all, when I tell you different characters, like all different stories I could tell you, but when Taco was there, everybody showed up because they felt appreciated, welcomed, and wanted to be around that energy. And then when he passed away, slowly but surely, they all went back to their homes, and they didn't play as nice without Taco there. So I think that's a lesson in life. Everybody could be the Taco in any situation, but it's
It's
just
true.
something that I never forgot. Years later, those things as a kid, I didn't remember that till I was writing something, and how some things are jogged in your memory. And I
Mhm.
was like, yeah, I do remember that. And it made a big difference on me to see that one man made such an impact on a village of about 2,000 people. So we're not talking about, it's small in terms of, US size, but in Greece, to those people, it meant the world to them.
Yeah. Well, I love seeing how that's being channeled through you and through the leaders of the Podfest community. And we're going to get a chance to experience that in real time in May. I mean, I know you do this every year now, and let's just cross our fingers. If you're listening to this rather than watching, my fingers are crossed right now. And we are knowing that live events are back, and Podfest Expo is back in real life. I will be there. Chris obviously will be there. Some amazing people are going to be there. Chris, what are a couple things that you're looking forward to giving our community the experience of in this next Podfest?
So we always have our beginner track. So if you're just getting started and you need help, it's there. For experienced podcasters, let's say you're a hobbyist, like you've been doing it, but now you want to make money. I mean, we have
Mhm.
tracks that we have some of the best tracks on how to leverage your community, make a living to feed yourself, and grow that so you could do it full time. The tracks that are really new, cutting edge, we've created, I don't know if you know this, Melanie, but we created an entire experiential hall now. So if you want to go into the experiential hall and learn about different editing techniques or building your own Canva templates, we literally have 4 rooms. And this is meant more, it's meant for beginners, but it's also meant for our pros that might get stuck on certain things, or they're using Adobe or Audacity, whatever, and they need help. We're working with the podcast editor community to have, literally, you bring your laptop and we fix it right then and there for you, with you. So that's cool. So we'll have a hands-on experiential hall, and then the Web3, which is all the stuff, all these terms that you're hearing, from NFTs to the blockchain to the Lightning Network, which is how Bitcoin is processed. I know Dave Jackson he's one of the first guinea pigs to layer the Lightning Network over his podcast, which allows users to send him Bitcoin. So
Oh,
we actually have some of the most advanced. So if you want like the normal ABCs, we have it, like from how to grow your LinkedIn, how to grow your Pinterest, how to traffic for your podcast, how to create your communities, how to grow your downloads, how to buy and advertise your podcast to grow your podcast. We have that all over the place, but we also have an experiential hall, a Web3 hall, and then the after parties are just phenomenal. We bring everybody together, and usually we have a few podcasters or musicians, so we've already booked their bands to play, so they're excited. They're all practicing. We'll have a couple of DJs there from our community. So everything is sourced from the community for the community. It takes, believe it or not, Melanie, it's easier to do it that way. It's lazier to go get it outsourced. I know it sounds crazy, but over time, it's easier just to listen to your community and
yeah.
utilize the ingredients that you could find within it, and they'll flourish.
Yeah, I love that. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I understand there's going to be a women in podcasting track as
Yes.
well,
Yep.
which I'm
Yep.
very excited about because my friend Jennifer Henskell is going to be a part of that. And I'm honored to be a part of that as well. And super exciting. I mean, all the different tracks you guys have are fulfilling and enriching for people, no matter what you're looking for, what your persuasion is, your needs are, your community is, your whoever
Yeah,
you are, and you're
we have
looking
a
for people
fiction
like you.
track. Yeah, mental
Yeah.
health wellness track. We have a healthcare track. We have a lot. I mean, we have an industry track, a B2B track. So I could go on for tracks. We have like
Yeah.
we'll have
Lots of
over
them.
300 presenters at Podfest, and we also host the largest influencer meet and greet in the world. So that's very unique. No one really does what we do. We'll have 2,000 people minimum in a room
Wow.
connecting, and if it's in round table, so it's not that aggressive. You sit down at the round table and we help you connect without really going too far out of your comfort zone, and we support you and help you in that. But that's probably one of everybody's favorite things, because the
Love it.
connections on that are just amazing.
Well, we will link up access in the show notes, but if you're listening to this and you don't have a pen handy, it is podfestexpo.com. And I'm very grateful that Chris is allowing some of us to give a special to our audience. So if you're a part of my community and you use the promo code Amplify, I believe that's going to get 20% off, Chris. Yeah.
20%
Yep.
off. Yep.
Yep. And that's very generous. Thank you. And it is in Orlando, right?
At the Hilton Orlando, right outside the convention center. This hotel has a lazy river. It's very family friendly. And it's actually right next to like Top Golf, the Mario Andretti Grand Prix. There's a lot of cool things. Literally, I believe it's walking. You could walk a tenth of a mile. It's all there.
And the dates are for this one are May 26th through the 29th. Did I get that
29th.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, cool. I am very excited to be there. And if you're joining us, I want you to do 2 things. First of all, I want you to, wherever you're listening to this, give me a little shout out in the comments, or give me a DM on Instagram, Coach Melanie Benson. Let me know you're coming so we can set an intention to meet live. It is one of my favorite things about being a guest speaker at an event or going to an event in general is like I get to meet my community in real life. So I'm super excited about that. So make sure you give me a little reach out and let me know to watch for you. Chris, I just got a couple wrap up questions for you. These are the fun questions I like to ask every guest. What is the boldest thing you've ever done to amplify the impact and reach of your business?
It's when I say, okay, so here's what I'll just say without explaining.
Okay.
So this is when I first started promotion, as you said, the event side, and I didn't know anything about it. So my first event I held at American Legion in June in Florida. The air condition broke and the Legionnaires had smoked cigars the night before. It was disgusting to say the least. So, and then I booked Brian Tracy. If people don't know who he is, a very famous, well-known speaker. And then I booked J. Conrad Levinson. And at the time, I had no idea about speaking fees. I didn't know they're negotiable. And I was broke after I booked J. Conrad Levinson. And then he wrote the book Guerrilla Marketing. So he had sold over 25 million copies. So the boldest thing is I paid for the speaker and I can't find anyone to come see him because no one knows who he is. so it taught me a blind spot. So let's say you might know who he is. Doesn't mean other people know who he is, even though he sold 25 million books. So the boldest thing we had to do is I'm talking to my camera guy, Anthony, who's been with me forever. And I'm like, what do? We don't know anyone who's going to show up. We just spent all this money. It's going to be a big loss. He said, let's go to Barnes and Noble and you could show all his books. So what we did was little Sony cam. This is before cell phones had cameras. We had a little Sony cam. I held up all his books, and he had tons. He had sold over 25 million. And then I held like Warren Buffett books, Robert Kiyosaki books, Ramsey, all the guys that you know, and Susie Orman, I remember, all together. And I said, he's outsold all of these people. And I dropped all the books. And then the Barnes & Noble employee like chased me out, like, because you could hear me just go, boom, yeah. The video ends with me just getting the hell out of the Barnes & Noble. And it went viral, not in a YouTube way, but it went viral within the people that I needed to reach in Tampa to show up at that event. And we were able to pack it in last minute. So that was the boldest thing when we had no money, didn't know how we were going to do it. So I would say creatively bold for my business, and taught me in that moment, don't ever use the excuse, I don't have money to get something done, because it seems to be something you hear from entrepreneurs all the time. I need money for that. It's the lack of creativity. You have to figure it out. So that's something that's really served me well as a promoter.
Love it. That's a great story. Okay, last question. What is one thing you wish you would have done sooner?
So this is for me with events specifically. I'm really good at community building. What I wish I would have done sooner is made my events look good. So this is a lesson you have to learn the hard way. So in events, you're actually better off losing money on an event, but making it look good to survive another day if you want a longevity. So in the early days, I might have made, let's say, $1,000 or $2,000, but I'll give you an example of this. So the first Podfest was at a Ramada Inn on West Shore Drive in Tampa, Florida. It was sandwiched between two strip clubs, one next to it and one down the thing. Now, as someone that lives in Tampa, you don't notice it because we have no zoning. Everything's next to a strip club. Okay. But if you come from another city, you notice it immediately. And especially the women are like, why'd you pick a hotel next to strip? But that blind spot. So now the hotel was cheaper. I made money, but you have a marketing problem, because even though the event was amazing, all certain people that came from outside was like, yeah, it was right next to a strip club. And they would repeat that over and over. So I wish, if I were to tell myself, you're better off breaking even or even losing $1,000. We're not talking losing a lot of money, losing a couple of grand, having a better looking venue and better signage than trying to make $2,000, because it actually creates a different growth trajectory on how people talk about. Now I understand that now, but if you were to ask me going back, I would, American Legion, like all that stuff, like, hey, but I had to learn in some way. So it is what it is. But that's what I wish someone would have told me, hey, let me show you how this charts, and it would have been a different trajectory. That's all.
I love that story. And thank you for sharing that. Because again, you're willing to start ugly, but sometimes there are things in our blind spot that are going to impact the longevity of our brand and our impact. And it's such a great story. Chris, thank you so much. I'm so excited to meet you in real life. Like, this will be our first time actually, I did meet you in real life one time at another event. I remember we've had an in-person connection, but this will be the first time at your event. So I'm super excited, and I'm excited to meet you as you're listening in. I hope you'll join us, podfestexpo.com. Feel free to use the code Amplify to get your 20% off. I'm not getting anything out of it. I think it's awesome that Chris is that generous, and I want to pass that on to you guys. So see you at Podfest, Chris and community. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. Be sure to join us right now in the Amplify Your Authority community at authorityamplifiers.com, and I'll share my 7 proven tips to be a highly paid expert that stands out in a crowded market. Plus, we're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.